Baltimore County Police are looking for a woman who impersonated an officer and took $15 from a man after a traffic stop. I'll stop and digress for just a second, and I will just say that this story has come up a couple of times about cops out there who are people who are impersonating police officers and pulling other people over. And this I predict will become, I mean, I'm not much of a psychic, but I mean, just from a grassroots kind of guy at the end of the bar kind of prediction, this is coming up a lot. And this has happened in my neighborhood. This has happened with women who have told me that they have gotten pulled over by people only to get kind of a creepy feeling as the cop was coming up to the side of the car that he wasn't a real police officer. There was a story in the news of somebody who was calling 911 and he was trying to verify that it was in fact a cop that was chasing him. And it's very complicated because it's just so easy to get the sort of material that this person was using to impersonate a police officer. But anyway, there you go. Baltimore County Police are looking for a woman who impersonated an officer and took $15 from a man after a traffic stop. The woman was driving a royal blue Chevrolet Malibu with a red light on the dashboard. So the guy pulled over. The man said that the woman asked for his license and registration. She was wearing a revolver on her hip. She had a dark blue Stetson-style hat. She was wearing light blue pants with a black stripe and a light blue shirt and a silver badge and a gold nameplate. She was about 30 to 40 years old, red or brown hair, nicely built. Looked like a cop to him. So anyway, when he told her that he didn't have either his registration or his license, the woman told him that he faced a $25 fine. Doesn't seem like much, but that he could pay it, quote, either the easy way or the hard way, unquote. When he told her that he only had $15, she took the money and left. And if you ask me, man, that guy's lucky. Because the last time I got pulled over by a male police officer who said that we could settle this either the easy or the hard way, the cop didn't mean any jive, $15. Well, at least he took me to Denny's for breakfast afterwards and sent me a nice card on my birthday. So there you go. West of the Rockies, Al is hanging on Coast to Coast AM. And Al, where are you going to take us on Open Lines?
I don't believe that the real Saddam Hussein was hanged tonight. I believe that it was an imposter. During his reign, he had two imposters that looked identical to him. He would send one or the other to events that he did not care to go to or was very cautious about. And just prior to the war ending in Iraq, the American helicopter command went after a convoy. It was a Russian convoy of 24 trucks that was entering into Syria. And the last part of the convoy was hit, and the Russians had protested, and Saddam was on that convoy, and he's in Syria, and the world is being fooled, and that information is going to come out down the line.
That's you're kind of jumping in early on the prediction show idea? This is your prediction?
It's more than a prediction. It's the truth.
Well, okay, because you have an opinion, which is totally fine, but you don't – I mean, the government would say they swabbed him, they have the DNA to prove it, and you say –
It is not the real Saddam.
Because
the Russians ferried him out in that convoy that went to Syria just at the end of the war.
All righty then. Well,
all righty.
You're on the record. I'm going to put you down as a prediction on that one, not on fact yet. But it's an interesting prediction nonetheless. We'll go first-time caller line where Danny is on Coast to Coast AM. Danny, it's open lines to the top of the hour. Where are you going to take us?
Hello. It's great to be on. I'm going to have to agree with Al. I think the whole thing with the trial and everything was a farce, and it was all so that the real Saddam could get out and he could go do whatever he wanted to do. I think it's all a farce. Everything about government and life is about making people, believe whatever is what the government thinks is good for them. And I think it's it's all a farce. The real guy could have been slipped out the back door while a lookalike was taken up and hanged. I mean,
all these things are possible, right? I mean, we could say this about anybody. We could say that Brezhnev is still alive. We could say Ronald Reagan never died.
Well,
right? I mean, what proof do we really have of anything?
Well, exactly. But the thing is, though.
But I mean, where does it end? I mean, we say, actually, this is not the real President Bush. That the real President Bush was ferried away by the Chinese, and he's being held currently in, some bamboo prison somewhere. And this President Bush is a lookalike. I mean, where do we end with that?
That doesn't make any sense. I mean, what you're saying doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
What the U.S. government is doing in Iraq is just ridiculous in the first place. I mean, we've got this war going on where, we shouldn't even be there in the first place.
Well, okay, that aside.
Now they're trying to say, we don't have any part of Saddam being hanged.
I understand
that's
that.
what they're saying now, is they're saying that we don't have any part of it. They're trying to back off of having any part of this. Is that not true, or what?
Well, I don't think they're trying to back off having any part of it. I don't think they're just trying to say that the Iraqi government is doing this, and that this is part of the fledgling first steps of this toddling democracy. And they're trying to give the credit to the Iraqi government for doing it because they don't want it. A, they don't want to be perceived that we're doing it, but B, they're the ones that that set up the court, and this is their justice. Right or wrong, they're trying to say this is their justice. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm trying to go with you here to a point, but if you're saying that Saddam Hussein that's not really him and that he really got ferried away, fine, but just trying to find some kind of proof, something tangible to hang on to on that one. So thank you, Danny. Here's George Herbert Walker Bush, really good friends with LBJ, and a time when LBJ, even when he's resigning, he goes to see, Bush 41.
Well, right. In fact, I was fascinated to see that's missing from all the history books that the Bushes, that H.W. Bush was very, very close with Johnson. And it went way back. They had the same key financial backers. They were tied in with the same interest, the oil and the Brown and Root, which is now KBR, with the big contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Their business just surged when Johnson became president and began escalating the Vietnam War. They were key backers of Poppy Bush as well. When Johnson left office and Nixon was being inaugurated, Bush actually left the inauguration to go to the airport to privately say goodbye to LBJ. And then, of course, I have the story in the book where somebody hears LBJ on the phone calling from Parkland Hospital as Kennedy is expiring, and he's saying to his lawyer an expletive, and then he complains that he has to sell his Halliburton stock, which I thought was very interesting.
Colonel active duty in the military, and by my experience, usually Halo guys are usually special operations or alerts detachments. Was your Mr. Cooper, the suspect, was he in any special operations or alerts type unit while he was in the military?
I can't ascertain that yet. What I did was I went through all of the military discharge papers that the family sent me. They sent me a whole bunch of stuff. And in a few minutes, Ian's going to bring out that last piece of evidence. That was something buried, and that's why I gave it to Ian. I thought it was it would carry probative value. But to answer your question, I haven't been able to determine that through records. Now, one of the sons tells me that he remembers his dad doing halo jumps at night somewhere near Fort Ord, California, and these were training missions before he went to Vietnam. He apparently served at least 2 tours in Vietnam. So Without seeing the actual records from a DD-214 form, I can't tell you, but I would say there's a high probability of it.
Very good. And the second question is, now, when you said he had 4 parachutes with him, or he was given 4 parachutes, now, from my experience, you got the square, which is much more maneuverable, a paracommander, which is semi-maneuverable, and your tactical round chute, which is what, like the 82nd jumps. Which chute did he go out of the plane with?
He ordered 4 chutes. He wanted 2 front and 2 back, and the FBI, they had to scramble around the Seattle area to find them. They were finally located at a skydiving school in Renton, Washington, which is very close to SeaTac Airport.
Mm-hmm. I know it well.
Yeah, and they delivered the 4 chutes. The actual flight attendant went off the plane, brought the chutes back on the board, on the plane. Cooper figured out real quick which one he wanted. He wanted the NB-8, which was a Navy emergency chute, full canopy, 28-foot canopy.
Okay.
And it was the least maneuverable of the chutes you have mentioned. However, it was the military chute that he would be most likely familiar with.
Yeah, I've jumped 28-foot rounds, and those things are stone cold hard to try to maneuver. So yeah. I'm wondering if he didn't go into trees and break his neck somewhere.
Well, the guys that inserted behind enemy lines in Vietnam in the 60s, they used those kinds of chutes too, and they were able to get through that dense jungle and get back safely on the ground. So they must have had some training on how to avoid trees or how to get out of the chute if they got hung up.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is, like you said, is that maybe somebody was on the ground giving him a hand to help him get out of a tree if that's what he went into, unless they saw a rope wrapped around his body or something like that.
It's an interesting speculation. The one key piece of evidence, of course, are the $20 bills found along the river.
Yeah, that fascinates me.
Yeah, and the prevailing thinking among FBI agents is that he never successfully lived when he hit the ground. He probably died before he hit the ground or when he hit the ground, and they said that the money is evidence of that. However, I heard an interesting bit of information is that he actually tried to tip 2 of these flight attendants for doing such a good job, and he pulled out a couple of wads of 20s. These 20s were rubber banded in $2,000 packets, and he tried to give each of the flight attendants $2,000 as a tip, and none of them would accept it. And the story I heard was he put the money not back in the satchel that was provided by the FBI, but into his raincoat. And so if he jumped out of an airplane going about 100, the money could have flown out of the raincoat. Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of ironic because I was actually in high school when that kid found that money on the beach up there. Mm-hmm. And kind of
Tom, I appreciate your unique perspective on that, and thanks for jumping in. Let's go first-time caller line. Jim is in Arizona on Coast to Coast AM for Galen Cook for just a few more minutes. Jim?
Good evening, Galen. How are you doing?
Very good, Jim. Thank you.
I'm a private investigator myself out of southern Arizona, and without any access to your files, you just verified something I discussed with the screener a moment ago. In these pictures, I see the gentleman is wearing Vietnam service medal with at least two successive decorations there, which indicates, like you said, 2 tours in Vietnam. My question was, have you, I'll give you the question and just a quick comment afterwards. Have you checked, possibly done a Freedom of Information Act if the family cannot verify his whereabouts? Much like the other gentleman indicated, if he was involved in special ops, there's a good possibility, was he under deployment of some kind? And that's one question. And my other comment was, having been an investigator a long time, sketch artist drawings can be like a Mr. Potato Head sometimes. They're not even close to the stuff. So I think he's close enough in these pictures. But
and I got to tell you one more thing. Apparently there was more than one sketch artist involved because Tina, who flew with the hijacker down to Reno, she was interviewed separately and gave her own eyewitness account. And the other flight attendants, Florence Schaffner and Alice Hancock, never flew out of Seattle. They deboarded in Seattle, and they gave apparently a different artist, police sketch artist, their version. So you had 2 or 3, maybe even 4 witnesses. That would be Billy Mitchell, the kid who sat across the aisle from Cooper, up to 4 different aspects of what D.B. Cooper looked like to these various people. But apparently, the descriptions are all relatively close.
Yeah.
My other question would be, was that a hand-drawn, or were they just using the layover strips that were popular in the 60s and 70s, where they would just get as close as they could by flipping different strips in the book until the feature more or less matched?
Yeah, that's a technical question. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Again, might be great to track down the sketch artist on that. Thank you, Jim. As a musician friend of mine would have said, if he looked at the photograph and then the sketch artist is close enough for jazz, as he would say.
Don't forget that. Don't forget that fingerprint, Ian.
Yeah, and we haven't, because I'm going to get Chris in here, and then that's it. Chris, we just got to be quick here. Chris is in Houston. I want to leave the last few minutes to talk about the fingerprint that's up at the website at coasttocoastam.com. So, Chris, let's just keep the question short if we can.
All right. Well, I just wanted to ask him, the DB Cooper took 2 parachutes, correct?
He took 2 out the door with him. That's correct.
Okay. Now, there was a $200,000 worth of 20s, and that makes 1,000 20s. Now, I don't know what the weight capacity of a parachute is for a 28-foot canopy, but compared to the individual that was going to be parachuting, but couldn't he use the second parachute for the money? Because I'm not sure how much it
was stitched. It was sealed, closed. It wasn't a functioning parachute. The $200,000 cash weighs about 22 pounds, and the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, saw D.B. Cooper attach a rope to his waist, about a 6 to 8 foot tether line, with the money in a separate satchel, and he was going to use that as a tethering line to jump out of that airplane with.
All right, now let's go to that, and thank you, Chris, for that. Go down, take a look at coasttocoastam.com. If you do the link up to these new pieces offered by Galen Cook, you scroll down to the bottom and you see this right thumb print. We've given this, I'm sure, to the FBI. Do they have a matching thumbprint from the D.B. Coopers on the plane?
Here's the story I have. According to the FBI, there are 66 unidentifiable fingerprints on Flight 305. Presumably, some of those may be from D.B. Cooper, but the FBI isn't saying. I did talk with Agent Larry Carr, who's the lead agent now, and he said they do have fingerprints. So what I did was I went through all these military records, and I have more to come yet, but I found an interesting one, and you've got it on the website. This was taken in 1949, so the suspect would have been 19 years old. These were discharge papers of his service in the Army Air Force, and part of the discharge procedure required his signature and his right thumbprint, and it's a very good thumbprint, one of the best I've seen, and I've got several others of this suspect. So what I did was I sent along the latest photo and a picture and this impression, or this right thumbprint, and mailed it to the FBI. So they probably got it about the same time that you put it up on your web, Ian.
Okay. And now we have a photograph here, too, that we've included that you've blocked out the signature, but that would give another piece of evidence for the FBI if they have the original handwritten note.
They do not. They do not have it. Cooper demanded all the notes be returned to him. Cooper did his best to make sure he didn't leave too much evidence behind.
That's pretty good.
But he might have left some DNA behind, though.
And that's what the FBI's indicated, that they had something that they're holding up their sleeve. And so if we can use that as an indicator, then we might be able to say they might have, if they could determine, for example, in their DNA evidence, whether or not the person they have DNA of was in blood group 0. Can they do that? Can they find out whether or not he's an O?
I'm not sure about that, but I will tell you this. The Sons all told me that if this investigation gets to that point, they will all submit DNA samples, and apparently that kind of determination can be made. So that's going to be the ace in the hole. But the fingerprint is good, and if this matches up with any of those 66 thumbprint or fingerprints that the FBI has, then we know my suspect was on Flight 305 that night.
We got to like that. Bob is in Pittsburgh on Coast to Coast AM for Gretchen Peters. Bob?
Good morning. How are you today?
Great. Glad to be here.
Okay, 30 years ago, I was in a Bogota, Colombia prison. I was smuggling cocaine out of Bogota. I got arrested down there, and I spent 27 months inside. And I got to meet a lot of interesting people down there, and lot of them told me the same story. basically that they were sacrificial lambs. There's a lot of people moving a lot of big things around. You know, they should. You know, you were talking about the people in Afghanistan with dirty knives cutting opium poppy stems, and they were showing these people down there walking around in little wading pools, crushing up cocaine leaves with ashes and stuff.
Right.
I'm thinking that the major pharmaceutical companies, with all the synthetics that they're putting out today, synthetic opiates and different drugs, are the ones that's really causing the problem. I mean, this war on drugs has been going on for my whole entire life.
Right.
They haven't made any kind of progress.
No, they haven't.
It's easier to. I mean, today there are more people dying from like overdoses in the United States than there were 30 years ago.
Well, then let's give a chance for Gretchen to jump in there. Thanks, Bob. Interesting thought.
I mean, it's sort of. I have a similar answer to before. I mean, I just think our drug wars,
sure,
as the caller said, are not working. A huge amount of money and effort has been spent on Colombia, and the amount of cocaine coming to this country has never changed at all.
No.
Now the violence has moved into Mexico, right at our borders. Some of it's spilling over into this country, but nothing has stopped the flow of drugs to this country. It's kind of like the flow of illegal immigrants. I sort of figure if you can't stop it, you might as well at least tax it.
I went to Puerto Vallarta earlier this year for vacation, and that was the big story there locally. People are talking about how far outside of the tourist zone you can actually go now, because of the kidnappings were already coming to Puerto Vallarta.
Right.
The mob killings. I mean,
and it was the same stuff you see in the border areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan: beheadings, kidnappings, drug smuggling, human trafficking. Right. All these groups get involved in the same stuff.
I want to take this to UFOs, and I want to argue by Occam's razor that the government is not covering up evidence of extraterrestrial spacecraft. They're covering up evidence of a terrestrial spacecraft program. I believe that the United States, we have our secret, black space program, and one of the reasons that I think that this is secret is that it involves nuclear power. And if you take a look at even the earliest sightings of UFOs, in fact, the Arnold case, when his plane came down, they actually ran a Geiger counter over it. And at that time in the 40s, the United States was experimenting with nuclear-powered ramjets. And the craft that he saw was going about 1,500 miles an hour. And that is right in line with the speeds that we were achieving in the late 1940s with ramjets. And I think that we went on to develop nuclear aircraft. Specifically, I believe that the U-2 and also the SR-71 have nuclear engines. There is a nuclear variant to both of those. And the reason why
I didn't know about that. I'm not familiar enough with the air. I mean, I knew that the early nuclear engines though were so clunky and so huge. I can't believe that they could have compressed one, been able to get one small enough to get into, a high altitude spy plane like that.
Oh, they definitely did get them down to that size, and I think that when you.
But by the 1940s,
the energy to weight ratio with nuclear is a lot greater than with chemical, and the beauty of it is that if you have a nuclear powered spacecraft, is that you can put a lot larger payloads into space, and one of the things that we've been working on with nuclear is what's called the nuclear light bulb, which is a fission reactor which is contained by a fused silica that has a tube around it. It's sort of like the same way that we have cryogenically cooled engines. Right. Well, anyways, this technology can be used in order to make a nuclear pumped laser. So I think that what we're doing is we're hiding this technology because we're afraid that if it gets out, number one, the energy industry would be cooked because if energy is too cheap.
Stop. What do you mean gets out? If you know about it, isn't it out?
No. What I'm talking about, if it gets to the point where it's widely known, I think that there's a lot of...
Wait. If we're talking about it on the radio, isn't it widely known?
No, it's not widely known.
So this is a secret.
In this country, they're not widely known. Like how many people know that Jesse Jackson helped kill Martin Luther King, for instance? But that's a little bit off the subject. But there's a lot of national secrets that we have here. I mean, if you just, but definitely though, if you take a look at the nuclear spacecraft, I think that there was a document that came out of Los Alamos called the Aspen, and this was published in 1960 by R.W. Bussard. That's Bussard.
Well, I'm out of time. I'm out of time. I'm sorry because I'm cut up to the top of the hour, but I appreciate the tip on that, and I will have to add. I don't know that it's popularly accepted that Jesse Jackson helped kill Martin Luther King. So I'll leave that there for now too. Arkansas on Coast to Coast AM. Charles?
Yes, Ian, it's a pleasure speaking with you this morning.
Thank you. Where are you going to take us?
I had a Bigfoot sighting back in 2002 in November.
Where were you?
Sir?
Where were you?
South of Brinkley, Arkansas. I live south of Brinkley, and I've got a farm and everything out in that area, and we've got some hunting land and everything out there. And my wife and I would leave out sometimes at night, ride the four-wheeler, and watch the wildlife and stuff at night. And we were riding next to, thinking about a mile and a half from my house. It was probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And a little desolate road next to an old abandoned home site that's grown up a thicket. We rounded a corner. My wife said, "You feel something strange?" I said, "What?" I said, "No, not really." She said, "I feel like I'm being watched." Well, we rounded the next bend, and there was a creature standing in the middle of this old farm road next to the thicket. It was probably about 7 foot tall and covered in reddish, kind of leaf-colored, fall-colored hair. It looked to be about 400 pounds, and it turned and looked at us and had bright yellow-colored eyes in the lights of the four-wheeler. We watched it for a minute or two, and it went off into the thicket. Well, over a period of about 4 months, this thing had used this home site, and I saw it about 7 or 8 times after that.
Why, did you ever snap a picture of it?
My wife's got a digital camera, and she does have a picture of this creature on the digital camera. I think we're stalking deer at night.
Well, I'd love to get that. If you could send us a photo, because, we love to put those on the website, and we get them all the time. And we love to put them up there so that other people can, download them and kind of go through them with, with their programs to look for those things which would help verify that it is, in fact, a Bigfoot sighting. Now, I'll ask you this question. I'm just kind of curious about it, because we have talked to other people, Bigfoot experts, who say that Bigfoot generally are so scared of men and don't want anything to do with humans. I would have said homophobic, but that implies something else. But they have a phobia about Homo sapiens, that they don't want to see us. Why do you think he was still standing there when you clearly, if you're taking a couple of ATVs out in the woods, he hears you coming?
I don't know. And what's funny about this creature, over a period of, like I said, the last 4 months of that year, he would come up around the home site. I've got livestock, and he'd come up around my area, and I've saw him in the edge of my yard. I drive a truck, and I've got iron, and I'll come in, and I've actually saw him in the edge of my yard, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I'd come in. And I've heard kind of a deep bellow, what you would call a howler or a holler, from one to another. There was more than one there, but I only actually saw the one creature, and I saw him probably 7 or 8 times in the general area. And I've also found deer carcasses that had the entrails half pulled out, and they were mutilated, because we have a vast majority of deer in the area.
And you don't think that was just from somebody else who was poaching on your hunting land?
Oh, no. I keep a pretty good eye, and these creatures, just classic description of what George has talked about and the guests have talked about.
Right.
I started watching it, and the soft organs were taken out of the insides of the deer.
I mean, Daniel Hotsucker has a book called Burying the Boys, and on the cover of that book is Lee Harvey Oswald and Barry Seal. Barry Seal was a drug runner and gun runner. He wound up shot to death on the courthouse steps, and in his black address book, the coroner found George Herbert Walker Bush's personal phone number. There's stories of Edward Kennedy was supposed to be on board with the Wellstone family 10 days before that plane crashed and burned, and that the Bushes were both seen at JFK Jr.'s airport, where his plane was stored days before he wound up dead.
Stop there. The Bushes themselves were seen at the airport for JFK?
Yes, they were, and so all were Mossad agents. And if you look into the New York senator seat that was open, and also the future presidency seat that was open that Bush was going to run for, and that Hillary Clinton wound up running for, you just see these characters all over the place. In fact, the Persian Gulf War was a pretext. The pretext that jump-started that was the theft of up to $14 billion worth of oil from Kuwait, and that jump-started the Persian Gulf War. And when that didn't go down, they decided to run this fake story that 14 babies were thrown out of incubators, and that was jump-started by an advertising firm. The CIA and advertising firms and the Bushes are all, this whole thing, Russ, you're completely right. Even Stan...
Okay. Let's give Russ a chance to respond to that. There was a lot there, and so I appreciate that. But I thought there's some good stuff in there, and there's some stuff in there that I've never heard before. It doesn't seem like the Bushes to get their hands dirty personally.
That's right. I mean, they're very, very careful, and we see this with both the father and the son. And I tell these stories in Family of Secrets. You know, the father, of course, famously said that he was out of the loop when it came to Iran-Contra, which was just impossible because the whole government at that level was deeply involved in this illegal covert operation. And then the son also claiming he didn't know about things. And in fact, you were talking about, we haven't gotten to the second half of the book, but there are all these stories, and they're showing George W. Bush to be a much more canny individual than we understood him to be, really quite clever about many, many tactical things, knowing, for example, how to, when he wanted a story that he would get out in the press, he would sort of bury it in plain sight. He would kind of, make sure that somebody overheard him telling a story or something, and then the press would think that they had discovered something on their own. So very, very careful to stage things and to keep their fingerprints off of them.
Well, let's get to Kathy in Homestead, Florida. She's been hanging on the longest here for a wild card line on Coast to Coast. Open lines, Kathy.
Hi, Ian. It's great to be on the show.
Thank you.
I have a very strange story. My youngest daughter has an obsessive fear of death. It started when she was 3 years old, when she sat me down on the couch and asked me, what happens when you go to sleep? And I tried to explain the dream cycles and everything, but she found no comfort in it. In fact, when she was 9 years old, she was afraid to go to sleep. For a year, she literally didn't sleep. She would stay awake until she would almost collapse. She would literally collapse. Finally, we had to put her on medication.
Yeah.
And incidentally, she was also a hoarder. It all stemmed from the OCD. She has obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Right.
She got rid of the hoarding. But we can find no comfort for her with this fear of death. In fact, like, we can't watch movies that deal with the afterlife. She'll scream at us to turn the movie off. Oh, you know I'm afraid of death. You can't watch that. But on the other hand, she loves anything and everything about serial killers. It's this strange dichotomy.
It sure is.
I thought, well, if anyone could offer her words of comfort, maybe you could. We're always, me and my older daughter are always collecting life after life stories, trying to, give her some sort of proof that there is no worry, that there is a life after life, not to worry about it. We're trying to collect stories to give her some sort of proof. She even went to our priest and said, "Oh, Father, I'm afraid of death." And all he could say to her was, "Well, dear, welcome to the club."
Yeah.
So
that doesn't help. It's sort of like telling somebody anorexic eat a sandwich or something like that's supposed to be the. I had an odd thought just while you were talking. So this is probably crazy, but just for whatever reason, it came to me. You know how people who are afraid of flying, they say that sometimes the thing that helps people who have the fear of flying the most is to learn how to fly. That it seems completely counterintuitive, but that's how they get over the fear of flying is that they become pilots. They get a pilot's license. And it's such an unusual, to me, that seems like that would never add up, but it does because it speaks to the control issue. That for a lot of people, a fear of flying, it all comes down to what they can't control. And what they can't control is what they fear the most. And I'm not sure how that relates to this, except to say, has your daughter, does she engage in conversation? Is she willing to engage in conversation with other people about the thing that she fears the most? Or is it just something you should never speak of and that's it? No one should ever talk about it.
Well, when we try to engage her, hello?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah, when we try to engage her in the conversation, it's of no use because there's always that big what if. What if it's not true? What if they're lying? What if it's just their imagination?
That there's life after death, you mean?
Right.
I just want to make sure I understand what the it is. So that if they're lying about, is they can't be truthful, it can't be. What do you think she fears the most? That's my question.
That there is nothing, that there is just a void, that there is a loss of consciousness, a loss of the personality, a loss of herself.
Kind of like when a TV goes out and there's just a little white dot in the middle of the screen and then there's nothing, that kind of thing. So if that's true, what does that mean for her life? If that's true, what does that mean for her life? What would she, if I could prove to her 100% that there's nothing after this existence on Earth, it's, we're all a random collection of cells and that's it. Everything you see is all that there is. And then you're done and that's it. One and done, as they say in the music business. What would that mean to her?
That's her greatest fear.
But what does it mean in a real world sense? Would she not go to work? Would she not do what? How would it change her life?
To her, that's stupid because I've said, well, if there's nothing, then what are you worried about? And she says, well, that's stupid. That's no comfort to me.
I understand. I'm not trying to bring her comfort. That may be the big problem with this. This is going to sound weird, and I don't know whether this is true, and I'm talking off the top of my head, but I run into this from time to time in other circles, is that some people are comfort junkies. They love to be comforted, and so they keep creating the problem, the never-ending problem, the unsolvable problem, so that the focus remains on them and their problem. And they will always be comforted. People will keep comforting them because comfort is attention.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I don't know whether that's true here, but I would. It's something either that will have the ring of truth to it to you, or it won't. But the other thing is that there's some people that keep recreating the circumstances in their life that keep giving them the most power.
That's interesting too.
This is something called fractal theory,
right.
Where you will seek the elements of your life don't change, like the roots of a tree relate to the bark on the tree in the same pattern as then the veins in the leaves, that everything has this sort of theory, everything follows the same patterns, and that our lives are the same. And so maybe she's just in that weird pattern, and she has to keep recreating that pattern because that's where she gets her power.
Right.
That's how she knows herself. She knows herself as the one who has this thing, and everybody else reacts this way around her thing. Take away that, then what is she? Which goes back to my initial question: is what if this is all that there is? What would change about her life? Would she go out and make as much money as possible so that she could go on every fabulous vacation on the planet? Would she, curl up in a ball and die on the floor? What would she do?
Good question. I never thought of it that way. It's so it would be like an attention-getting thing.
Does it get her attention?
Oh, for sure. We're always revolving
right
around her.
Right. You have other kids?
Yes, my older daughter.
Right. So, but whenever she plays this card, everything stops. Right? Turn off that movie. Don't do this. Don't do that. You know I have this.
Right. Exactly.
So, I don't know how much of that is helpful. I wish I could give you some 100% guarantee, but that's the difference. That's the difference between faith and proof. If you had proof, you wouldn't need faith. We'd be all proof believers because we'd all have the proof. What we have is the faith that it's true.
Exactly.
And I'm good with the faith.
Me too.
I like faith. Me
too. I'm so happy with it. Exactly.
I don't need the proof. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But it's the faith that I'm right, or the faith that these things that I believe in are true, that leads me to do things that are bigger than myself. For example, how much does she do to volunteer for others? How many, in this obsession about whether or not there's an afterlife, how many people get fed by that? How many shoes are collected for people without proper footwear? How much food ends up on a plate? I mean, that's the ultimate purpose of what any of these belief systems are supposed to be, is that we're supposed to be better for it. And like when people obsess about the rapture or whatever, okay, fine, but does that feed anybody?
No.
Does it
does not
put blankets on the cold? Does it bring heat to somebody who's freezing to death at night? I don't think so. So I try not to get sidetracked with those things. So if that's all her faith is about, and it all hinges on that, ultimately then what's the point? I don't know how to shift the paradigm for you other than that, because I'm not a therapist, but I hope at least in that sense the question of perhaps there's a few things that need to be dislodged, and maybe, Kathy, some of that starts with you and the other people in the family to stop enabling it. That maybe it's a much bigger question than is there an afterlife, but just is this, as you say, just another form of a kind of obsessive compulsive display that gives her power.
I see. Very interesting. Thank you.
No, thank you. I hope that was something I'd never heard before. I've never heard anybody ever do that to the point where other people couldn't live their lives the way they want to around them.